My first day at the airport. Chapter 1. The Heavy Suitcase. The sun hadn't even risen when the alarm clock on my bedside table began its loud, rhythmic buzzing. It was 4 a.m. Usually I hate the morning, but today was different. Today was the day I would finally see the world beyond my small hometown. My suitcase sat by the door, looking like a giant, overstuffed monster. I had packed and unpacked it 3 times. At first, I tried to bring everything: my favorite books, 3 pairs of shoes, and even a heavy coat just in case. But my mother had laughed and said, "You are going to a new life, not a new planet." By 5 a.m., we were in the taxi. The streets were quiet and empty. I watched the familiar shops and trees pass by my window. I felt a strange tightness in my chest. It was a mix of butterflies in my stomach, that nervous feeling you get before something big, and a little bit of sadness. "Are you ready?" my father asked, glancing at me through the rearview mirror. "I think so," I whispered. But in my head, I was thinking, what if I get lost? What if I miss my flight? Chapter 2. The Glass Giant. When the taxi pulled up to the departures terminal, I gasped. The airport looked like a palace made of glass and steel. It was so bright that it felt like daytime inside, even though it was still dark outside. As soon as the sliding doors opened, a wave of sound hit me. It was a symphony of rolling suitcases, beeping security carts, and voices speaking languages I didn't recognize. At first, the airport felt like a giant maze designed to confuse me. "Look for the screens," my father instructed. We walked toward a massive digital board. Hundreds of yellow and white letters flickered and changed. I felt dizzy looking at them. London, Dubai, Singapore, Tokyo, and then I saw it. Flight AI-102, Gate B-17, status on time. Finding my flight on that board made it feel real. I wasn't just dreaming, I was actually leaving. Chapter 3. The Check-in Challenge. My first task was the check-in counter. I stood in a long line, watching people handle their passports with confidence. I held mine so tightly that my hands were sweating. When it was finally my turn, a woman with a very neat uniform smiled at me. "Good morning. Passport and ticket, please?" she said. Her English was very fast. I hesitated for a second. "Don't panic," I told myself. "Here you go," I said, handing her the documents. She placed my suitcase on a moving belt. I watched the red numbers on the scale climb up. 22 kilograms. "Perfect," she said, sticking a long white tag on the handle. "Here's your boarding pass. You are in seat 24A. That's a window seat." A window seat! I felt a surge of joy. I would be able to see the clouds. Chapter 4. The Hardest Goodbye. The walk to the security gate was the shortest walk of my life. I wanted the hallway to be miles long so I wouldn't have to say goodbye to my parents. Somber. At the security entrance, only passengers are allowed to enter. I turned around to look at my mother and father. My mother's eyes were red. "Call us as soon as you land," she said, hugging me so hard I could barely breathe. My father shook my hand, then pulled me into a hug too. "Work hard, be brave, and don't forget where you came from," he whispered. I walked through the gate and didn't look back. I knew if I looked back, I might cry, and I wanted to be a silent builder, someone who builds their future quietly and with strength. Chapter 5. The Security Maze. Now I was truly alone. I had to pass through security. "Laptops out, shoes off, belts in the bin," a loud officer shouted. It felt like a movie. I quickly put my backpack, my watch, and my shoes into a plastic tray.
I walked through a metal detector. A sharp pause. Beep! My heart stopped. The officer looked at me. "Step back, please. Check your pockets." I felt so embarrassed. I reached into my pocket and found a small coin. I felt so embarrassed. I quickly put the coin in the tray and walked through again. This time, it was silent. "You're good to go," the officer said. I gathered my things as fast as I could. My hands were shaking, but I had passed the test. Chapter 6: The City Inside a City. Once I was past security, the airport changed again. This area is called the airside. I was impressed. It looked like a luxury shopping mall. There were shops selling gold watches, expensive chocolates, and perfumes. I found a small cafe and ordered a coffee. I needed a moment to breathe. I sat by a giant window that looked out onto the tarmac, the area where the planes park. I watched a jumbo jet land. It was so graceful. It looked like a giant bird touching the ground. Nearby, small yellow trucks were carrying luggage, and people in neon vests were waving orange sticks to guide the planes. It was a perfectly timed dance. I took out my notebook. I wanted to write down everything I saw. This was the first page of my new story. "Attention passengers, this is the final boarding call for flight AI 102 to London." That was me. I stood up, slung my backpack over my shoulder, and hurried toward gate B17. There was a short line at the door. I watched the flight attendant scan the boarding passes. Beep, beep, beep. When I reached the door of the airplane, a blast of cool air hit my face. "Welcome," a smiling stewardess greeted me. "Your seat is down the aisle on the right." I walked through the narrow hallway of the plane. It smelled like new carpet and cleaning supplies. I found row 24 and sat down by the window. I buckled my seatbelt. The captain's voice came over the speakers. "Cabin crew, prepare for takeoff." The engines began to roar. It wasn't just a sound, it was a vibration that I could feel in my bones. The plane started to move, slowly at first, then faster and faster. The buildings outside became a blur. Suddenly, I felt a push against my chest. The nose of the plane lifted. My stomach dropped, and for a second, I felt like I was on a roller coaster. Then, the ground fell away. I looked out the window. My city was becoming smaller. The houses looked like toys. The cars looked like ants. The giant airport, which had felt so big and scary just an hour ago, was now just a tiny gray square on the earth. We climbed higher and higher until we broke through the gray clouds. Above the clouds, the sun was shining brilliantly. It was a sea of white foam as far as I could see. Chapter 9: Reflecting in the Clouds. As the plane leveled out, I leaned my head against the window. At first, in the airport, I was a boy who was afraid of the noise and the crowds. I was afraid of making a mistake. But I realized that the airport is a place of transition. It is where you leave your old self behind and become the person you are meant to be. I thought about my parents. They were probably driving home now, talking about me. I thought about my new city where no one knew my name yet. I realized that life is a lot like an airport. There are long waits, there is confusing information, and sometimes you have to leave things behind. But if you have the courage to board the plane, you get to see the world from above the clouds. The stewardess came by with a tray of food. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked. "Pasta, please," I said. My voice sounded stronger now. I opened my tray table and settled into my seat. I had many hours of flying ahead of me, but I wasn't nervous anymore. The first day at the airport was over. I had survived the maze, the security, and the goodbyes. As the sun began to set over the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of pink and orange, I closed my eyes. I was no longer just a boy from a small town. I was a traveler, and this was only the first chapter of my story.